Okay, everybody, it's now 4 o'clock South Africa time. I'm going to formally open the webinar. I'd like to welcome you all. I'm Liz Dartnell, the Executive Director of the Sexual Violence Research Initiative, and I'm really delighted to be opening this webinar of the launch of the SVRI's grant call for 2022, the SVRI Research Grant, Knowledge for Action to End Violence Against Women and Violence Against Children. But before we start, I would just like to hand the floor over to my colleague from Kudo, Alice, just to talk a little bit about the Kudo platform so you can understand it better and to work out how to use the amazing options that is available to you, particularly in terms of language. Over to you, Alice. Thank you so much, Alice. And we really appreciate the quick tutorial. It was super helpful. So let's now start the webinar. So first, let me introduce our panel of speakers. First of all, there's myself, the Executive Director of the Sexual Violence Research Initiative, and we have 3 amazing speakers to follow. Professor Heidi Stockel, who is the Professor of Social Epidemiology and is the Director of Gender Violence and Health Centre at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She's also a member of the SVRI Leadership Council and as a member of the SVRI Grant Selection Committee. So welcome, Heidi, and thank you for joining the panel. We're super excited also to have Enrique Duncan. Enrique is an SVRI grantee, but also is the Deputy Director and Director of MAPA at NOSSIS in Brazil. So again, welcome, Enrique, and it's great to have you with us. And of course, we have our very amazing Angelica Pino, SVRI Grants Manager and Capacity Strengthening Specialist with us. So what are we going to be doing over the next hour with you? I'm going to give a brief overview of the SVRI grant making. Heidi's going to talk through what we look for in proposals and our principles against which we compare proposals and what are really important to us to see in proposals. Then Enrique and Heidi are going to talk about what it's like to be an SVRI grantee, and Enrique will share a little bit her project that is being funded through the SVRI grant. And then Angelica is going to go through this year's grant, followed by some time for you to ask us questions. So first of all, what have we been doing over the past few years in terms of grant making? But the SVRI, just a little bit about us first. We were first established in 2003 as part of an initiative working to address what we call the 1090 gap, where less than or only 10% of the resources worldwide are devoted to health research. Less than 10% of the worldwide resources devoted to health research are put towards health in low and middle income countries, where we experience 90% of all preventable health problems worldwide. In response to this inequity, the SVRI works to increase research and research resources on violence against women and violence against children in low and middle income countries. And we do this through building evidence, strengthening capacity, promoting partnerships and influencing change. And of course, every 2 to 3 years, we host the largest event in the field called the SVRI Forum. And next year it will be held in Cancun in Mexico in September 2022. So we would love you all to attend, and Lisa will share in the chat the SVRI Forum website. So our grant making. The SVRI has been grant making in different ways since 2012. In 2013, we formally established the SVRI grant, and we as grant made on our own from 2014 to 2015. But in 2016, we partnered with the World Bank Group, basically doubling the amount of funding that we had available to on-grant. And we did that through what we called the SVRI World Bank Group Development Marketplace Awards. And during this time with our partners, we have awarded 68 grants with dispersing over $7 million. And last year, we're really proud to announce that we launched the SVRI Research Grant that we're going to be talking to you about today, the Knowledge to Action to End Violence Against Women and Violence Against Children in Low and Middle Income Countries. This is a pooled fund between SVRI and an anonymous donor and CEDA, and we are really grateful to our funding partners. So where has our funding taken place? We have worked really hard as grant makers to ensure regional diversity, to in our grant making, with over 40% of our grants being awarded in Africa, 20% in the Middle East and North Africa, and 10% in Latin America and the Caribbean, 10% in East Asia, 10% in South Asia, and 10% in Europe and Central Asia. And we're working very hard to equalize the number of grants across the region. What do our grantees produce as outputs of their grants? The types of outputs produced are posters, conference presentations, blog posts, briefing papers, project reports, peer-reviewed journal articles, research reports, and project videos. At the SVRI Forum alone in 2019, we had 18 SVRI grantees and SVRI World Bank Group Development Marketplace Award winners presenting their findings, which is a really big achievement because you really do have to apply to present at the SVRI Forum. So just being a grantee does not mean that you get a presentation at SVRI Forum. All applications are peer reviewed, and so you just have to be doing so really awesome research. Research is going to make a difference in the world. And what are some of the impacts of our research funding? We did a study with our past grantees and we asked them what they thought of the impact of the grant has had for them. 87% of the grant winners surveyed who had applied for additional research funding were able to successfully leverage the receipt of their SVRI grant to acquire more funding. One of our grantees calls the SVRI grant or the SVRI research grant their golden grant. It's like the goose that laid the golden egg. Other outputs of the research funded have been really widely disseminated around the world. So please use the SVRI as a platform to share your important resources. We have a really important wide network of over 6,500 plus members globally that we send and share materials with. So use us, even if you're not a grantee. We really do think it is one of our important services to the field is to share research resources as far and as widely as possible. 92% of our surveyed award winners reported forging relationships with local government agencies, practitioners, universities, and other researchers, which is a really important step to ensure the use of research in policy making and practice. And then all of our grant winners believe that their projects had made a difference or will make a difference to the evidence base on violence against women and research, and of course, hopefully will serve to improve the lives of women and girls on the ground. Now, I'm going to hand over to Heidi to talk about what we like to see in applications. So over to you, Heidi. Thank you.
Thank you. That's really lovely. Who is sharing the presentation now? Sorry for that. I think, Liz, would you continue sharing the presentation?
I can share for you.
That would be lovely.
Just a second.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. So I have the nice chance now to talk about the SVRI grant-making principles, which are actually quite similar to the SVRI principles that we from the leadership councils and everyone in SVRI shares. We can go to the next slide for that. So there are a couple of core principles that everyone at SVRI shares and that really are hugely important for the grants and that should underline the applications of it. The first one is quite obvious, is that we do believe in feminist principles. That means that we want to make sure that the voices of women and children are heard, that power, the distribution of power and the inequities in power are kind of shown in the research and are acknowledged. So not just only the power inequities that we see in society, but also those we see in the research and how it is done. We don't really want our grantees to shy away from these issues, but to explore them and to work against them and work towards a more equitable research kind. Obviously, very crucial is the ethical aspect of the research that we do. We work on violence against women, violence against children, other forms of gender-based violence. And therefore, it is really important, and it's actually paramount, that the work that we conduct is safe and on a high ethical ground, and that we are willing to stop work when we see that it does more harm to people. The other very important issue is innovation, obviously. I mean, we want to see research that is really changing the field of violence against women and children's research, that really thinks beyond the norm, that thinks that goes across boundaries, be it, and you can see it later already, it can be cross-sectoral, including different sectors, it can be multidisciplinary, because we do believe that this is where you get the very good ideas that really push the field further. Evidence-informed is crucial. We do believe that programs and projects, interventions, etc., that are rolled out should have an evidence base. They should have been shown to be working, and decisions that are taken should be based on available evidence in the field. Collaboration is really crucial, we believe. It is very rarely that a single person can, on his, her own, really change the field, but you do have to work with other people, be it with activists on the ground, be it with partners in government, be it with local actors on the ground. So there are quite a variety of people, not just pure academic researchers, that will be necessary to really drive change. Diversity is important. The more diverse the team can be, the better. The more diverse the topics are in addressing them. Gender equality kind of comes very much with the feminist idea. And the other really important principle is that the research is actionable. We don't just want to do research that sits on the desk and is used for a pure academic paper but never sees any change. We do want to see that the research that we fund is actually really going to bring about a change in any way for the women or children that experience violence and that helps to improve their lives. The next slide. So there are a couple of things that we would like to see in proposals based on what I just have said. So really, we want that the research that is funded through this grant really advances the knowledge on violence against women and children prevention and response in low and middle income countries. And that, as we said before, we think is most likely to be possible when it brings in different perspectives, if it brings in different voices and really connects with those who might take up this research from the very beginning. So consortiums, partnerships, etc., are really important. And we do believe that they should be led by organizations that are based in low and middle income countries, or at least involve them on an equal level, because we do want to address some of the disparities in power that we see in the research arena as well. There are different ways how you can manage to really get different voices heard, and that means you can have people on your advisory boards who really will drive the research to the next level and really show us how you want to involve them to make sure that there will be a good impact. It is important that you show that you know the current evidence in the field, that you know which gap it is that you're addressing. And beyond just saying, yes, we will seek ethical approval, we hope that all of you do it. I think that's one of the prerequisites. We really want the grantees to explain in detail how they will deal with the ethical issues that come up in the planned research. And I don't think we had any proposal yet that didn't really work on a very sensitive issue, where it's very important to show that the well-being of the participant, the well-being of the staff, the well-being of the researchers is taken care of. And as I mentioned, we really want to see how is this research going to be used in the future, which law is it going to involve, which program is it going to inform, etc. And then I think the more other kind of pieces, it's similar to other grants, it should be very clear in your abstract, which will be read first, what it is that you want to do, what your aims and objectives are, what your methods are, and what your uptake strategy is. And we will look at the budget and make sure that, you know, the budget that is claimed is sound, is justified, is equally distributed, which is a quite important aspect for us as well. So next slide, and I think it's also the time when I have the honor to introduce Enrique. So maybe you can go to the live video section if you want to see Enrique. So I have the real pleasure to introduce Enrique, who works, as Liz already said, at NOSA, which is a women's-led civic engagement and activism group in Latin America that develops methodologies and technologies to really equip young people, men and women, etc., to really bring about change in policy making and make their voices heard. Enrique now will tell you a little bit about the SVRI grant that she has received. And after that, I'm very keen to engage in a little bit of a discussion about how that grant making went for her. So over to you, Enrique.
Well, actually, can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Cool. There's just a quick video playback, and then I'll jump in. Is everything on track for the video? There you go. We have 90 seconds. 90 seconds to remind you of the feeling that surrounds every woman when one of us suffers violence. We have all experienced the taste of impotence. This feeling was responsible for the emergence of a beautiful and sensitive solidarity network. The will to help break the cycle of violence and bring back a chance to heal made Mapa do Acolhimento possible. We believe that access to mental health and justice are the first steps for women in vulnerability to rebuild their lives, their self-esteem, their confidence, their financial autonomy, and their protagonism. As soon as we launched the platform, psychologists and lawyers from all over the country raised their hands to say, I can help. Mapa do Acolhimento runs a mission, supporting women who need care through volunteers willing to help. In under 90 seconds, an automatic geolocalization tool connects a volunteer with a woman at risk. These seconds impact a lifetime. This match not only saves, but changes life. Well, with this quick introduction, and I have to say, listening to my own voice sometimes is a little frustrating, but I hope you guys understood a little bit of the projects that we put in and how we got to the SVRI and this grant opportunity. I actually have PowerPoints, but I'm absolutely fine to go without it because it's mostly talking anyway. So my name's Enrique. I'm a political scientist. Thank you very much, everyone from the SVRI team, not only for this space, but for all of the engagements that we've been having over the past almost 2 years now. I think we submitted our first proposal in September 2019. So this is almost 2 years of back and forth and a very healthy relationship. I have to agree with the concept of the golden grants that was introduced by Liz. I think the SVRI opportunity has been a door opening experience for us, not only with other engagements, but to our work as well. I have to say, during the whole entire concept of the workshop experience, that was supposed to be in Cape Town, but due to COVID, we had to do it online. We learned a lot. It was a great experience for us as practitioners. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about my work at NOSAS. We are an organization that supports citizens in influencing public policy. We want to envision a world in which power is more evenly distributed, and developing public policy is a very tangible side of power. We organize people and advocate for causes in different matters. And when it comes to women's rights, as a women-led and women-run organization, we understood that there was a gap between public policy and what was actually reaching out for the Brazilian population as a whole. We decided to develop an initiative that was service provision focused, very inspired in the Greek movements, working with refugees, in receiving refugees when the Greek government wasn't necessarily equipped to do it. There were parallel lines of nurses and doctors and teachers and lawyers aiding these refugees arriving in Greece. And we were like, maybe we can do this in Brazil, dealing with GBV. And this can set a precedent for public policy to speed up and actually influence. We understand that the biggest gap in the Brazilian scenery, in which we do have a very big blueprint for universal healthcare, was access to mental health and justice. So we coordinated an initiative that was focused on the service provision of mental health through psychologists and justice through lawyers, in which we build a map of volunteers. And now we articulate this map and match people, women, trans women and trans male as well, needing support. And this network has actually been something that we are very proud of. However, we are not researchers from the get-go. This is not something that we have been doing for a long time. We're advocates. We are activists. We're practitioners. And I looked at the SVRI grant in 2009, and I saw the list that Heidi just shared with you: feminist and ethical and innovative and cross contributors. And I was like, this is basically us. We should do this, even if it's not necessarily our field of research. This is, our project fits into this criteria. And we were like, okay, so let's build a research project. Let's articulate from it, and let's learn from this experience. And this is what, for me, was the most magical and innovative part of the SVRI relationship, is that we learned a lot. It's not only that we've got funds for things that we already do, but it's now that we can learn a new part of monitoring and evaluation and connecting with the beneficiaries of our project in a responsible and ethical way. It wasn't necessarily a simple engagement, because the bureaucracy of creating a research project is very, very frightening for practitioners like us. Not only in developing the research theory and organizing it, in which we got a lot of assistance from the SVRI, but also into the ethical committee approval and all of the steps that ends up being very in a not such fast forward pace as I am originally used to. But this has also been a learning experience. Right now, I also can mention the COVID situation, in which in Brazil has been heartbreaking. We have just reached 500,000 deaths in my country. And throughout this whole engagement, the approval from the SVRI, I think we received just before COVID started in Brazil, has been very responsible and flexible to adapting a research organization and a research initiative to a context nationwide, because our objective with this research, and I didn't mention this before, apologies for that, is to understand from the beneficiary's perspective the effects of MAPA in their lives. So we want to hear them. We want to know their autonomy, if it improved. We want to know if their financial situation improved. We want to know if they believe that this intervention that is ongoing is something that has changed, and how has it changed their lives and their relationship to violence. We all here, I believe, are very engaged with GBV and understand the cycle of violence. And this is an opportunity to dive in and hear the beneficiaries firsthand. And our objectives with this listening experience is twofold. One is to adapt our service provision and improve it, ensure that we have a project that targets the flaws and the obstacles. And one of the flaws that we have already identified through this process is most of the women that are supported by MAPA are minority groups, are women of color in Brazil. However, the group of volunteers are a group of privileged white women. And we need to equip these privileged white women to understand the intersectionality of the violence that the beneficiaries are receiving. And the insights that we get is that we can now improve the service provision by providing further capacity building, further contact, further training to our volunteers, and ensure that this service is even better for the next round. MAPA is a continuing project, so the next round is like in 5 minutes. We have a woman being assisted every hour, so it's literally something that is very, very fast. And the second precedent, coming back to the process of NOSAs in general, as we work with advocating for public policy, it's creating a credible precedent of with institutional recognition that service provision of mental health and justice are key to breaking the cycle of violence. And with that, we will actually be able to not necessarily end gender-based violence in Brazil, but prevent it from escalating, prevent it from perpetuating. And this should be not done on the long run by an organization like ours on a volunteer basis, but by government.
Yeah.
This should be conducted. Yes.
I think, as everybody can hear, how amazingly lucky we are to have such an incredibly passionate and incredibly a wonderful project to be able to work with and partner with. We have a limited amount of time, so I'm going to say thank you for that. We love this project. It's the best project. I'm going to hand back to Heidi just to ask you some specific questions around your experience of. Well, I think you've also elaborated on this. I'm going to hand over to Heidi.
Yes, I also want to say, Enrique, thanks so much. It's an amazing, amazing project. And as Liz hinted, I think you already said some of the things where SVRI really has been a slightly different grant makers to others. And it would be really nice if you could say what was the most, different aspect you saw on this grant compared to other grants that you have received before, and how SVRI does.
So we're at NASA's, we're very privileged to have lots of core grants in which we have funding flexibility in some sorts. But this also means that funding is limited to execute the work and actually monitor and evaluate and research upon the consequences of the work. So having a direct fund that is looking for the insights and not necessarily attached to the success of the project, but to the responsibility of the project, the engagement of the project on the long run, and how can we adapt, is a very unique opportunity, because SVRI didn't fund MAPA for it to start. So you're not looking for the best possible package with a very beautiful bow on top of it, saying, look how beautiful this project that I funded is resulting on. You want to see the end game of violence on the lenses of MAPA. So this for us is an opportunity to dialogue in a very open and transparent way. There are things that we might not know. There are things that might not be working. And we still want to understand them deeply without having to say, hey, funder, this is very pretty anyhow. So it's an opportunity for us to be candid and to engage on the research as a whole. And not only that, SVRI understood our limitations. So they understood very quickly that we're not researchers. And we were like, hey, we think you guys have a good idea, but hold my hand here and let's dive in this together. And I'll show you the pathway for you to build a robust proposal, for you to engage with a team that will be experts on this field, and you will learn as well. So this is something that is staying with NASA's. Our team is more equipped for future research, even if we don't have access to resources like this. But we now have the mentality, the mindset to conduct opportunities like this.
I think you answered my next question in some ways already, which is really
oh my God,
you changed your organization. You mentioned that, for example, you equipped your volunteers better and you had more of a research mind. But what do you think really NASA is going to do differently in the future based on this grant and the whole experience around it?
I think we'll definitely do more research. It's something that we're engaging with. Most recently, this is not only because of the SVRI grants, but because the Brazilian context numbers are every day more scarce, specifically when we're talking about human rights and women's rights. One of the researchers I use to build the narrative upon MAPA has been consistently funded by the federal government. This year, it was funded by Uber. So it's just an example how the context of Brazil is no longer being a structure in which knowledge is produced in an autonomous way in a federal funded initiative that should be the case. So we are seeing that this gap actually makes us part of the actors that need to start producing this consistently. One of the ideas we currently have is NASA's was part of the activist initiative that advocated for and successfully guaranteed basic income during the pandemic. we want to cross-reference basic income and violence against women and see the impact of cash transfers to tackling GBV. And this is something we can do from MAPA's engagements and from the perspective of the distribution of funds. We want to cross-reference these two and see what happened. People received funds.
I mean,
was that cool?
I like to see that. But just the last, before we go off too long on that discussion, which I could have with you anytime, could you give advice to potential applicants? That would be amazing.
I think everyone needs to be hopeful and candid. These are two things. If you do believe that the criteria is there, match your project, and you are ready for time commitments, because it's not just a walk in the park. The SVRI grant requires a lot of energy, a lot of commitment, and it does produce results in the end, not only in terms of the research, but in terms of professional development for the organization as a whole. So if you're ready for this kind of commitment, you believe you fit in the criteria, as we did 2 years ago, and you are engaged in doing this, then go for it, but show your flaws. Don't tell them that you're ready if you're not, because they will help you get ready as well. Tell them about the things that you are not ready to do, where you will need assistance, to see if they can help, or to see if you can build this power within your organization or with partners through a winning coalition to build this engagement. I tend to talk a lot. I should have briefed you guys on that. So I'm going to be quiet now and let the organization of the webinar go on.
Thank you so much, Enrique.
Thank you, Enrique. Over to you, Angelica. Thank you, Heidi. Love your passion.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Heidi, and thanks, Enrique. That is fantastic. So yeah, we'll have to be as lively as Enrique, because we're now going to go to the very practical things about how to apply for these grants. So you will hear now from me from the technicalities. So if you can put up the slides, maybe. Thank you. So yeah, thanks again very much, Heidi, for so clearly explaining the principles that guide SVRI grant making, and to Enrique for such thoughtful insights really in the way we do like to do grant making. So I will explain to you now the practicalities, technicalities of what it involves applying for our grant. But firstly, I would like to reinforce what Lisa and Heidi also have already mentioned. The SVRI aims to tip the scales when it comes to resources for research between high-income and low-middle-income countries, of course, in favor of low and middle-income countries. And we want to provide platforms for researchers from those settings to showcase their work and the impact they're making in public policy. We also know there is research going on. There is research being conducted in low and middle-income countries. So this grant, what we want to do is amplify that work. We know there is need for more research, more resources for research in low and middle-income countries. So we want to really promote more and more space, new voices coming to the field to discuss violence against women and violence against children. And you can see that this very key principle is translated in our guidelines. So, first of all, who can apply for this grant? Applicants should be affiliated with a recognized, legally constituted research institution or organization with existing research or programming capacity on violence against women or violence against children. This is very important, as Enrique said, and we get a lot of questions. Do I have to be a research institution? You don't, but you have to show capacity, knowledge in the field. And as Enrique said, they were not doing research, but they accessed the grant anyway. So we want to see good partnerships there. Grants, though, are given to institutions, not to individuals. So this is not a grant for studies, for research, studies. It's really for actionable research for organizations. Where appropriate, we like to see, and I think Heidi also raised that, we want to see partnerships between multiple organizations, could be a local NGO, a practice-based agency, academic institutions, NGOs. So we really like to see consortiums. No one can do everything on its own, like she mentioned. Of course, we give preference to proposals submitted and led by organizations based in low and middle income countries. We are not saying that high-income countries organizations cannot be part of consortium. They can even lead some proposals that we really want to see, to strengthen the protagonism of low and middle-income country organizations. Organizations and consortium can submit up to 2 proposals, but of course, considering that the limited resources, you could only get 1 fund. Then, where appropriate, we also like to see as an objective the strengthening the research capacity of the implementing agency. Next slide, please. Other considerations. Previous grantees will not be considered as principal applicants. They can be members of consortiums, but they cannot be the fiscal agent. Institutions also who have a current grant with us, they cannot apply this time around. And grant applications that are proposing work led by UN or other multilateral agencies will not be considered. These organizations can be part of consortium, but they cannot be really the recipient of the grant. And of course, maybe something that's pretty obvious, all the research must take place in low and middle income countries, and it must be focused on violence against women or violence against children, prevention and response. Next slide, please. What are the type of projects we are looking for? Implementation science, additional components or standalone studies, studies that address the intersection between violence against women and violence against children. That's very interesting for us, a new area of work. Studies on how to integrate violence against women and or violence against children programming into other sectoral work. Those proposals that develop innovative methods and tools, research tools. Secondary analysis of existing data. Research on under-researched populations or higher risk population or vulnerable populations. We really welcome that. And of course, very topical. And we opened this area of work last year and we're continuing with it. Research on the impact of COVID on violence against women and violence against children. Very importantly, I think Heidi also already said, the research must address the gap in the field and build on existing knowledge. And just to give you a bit of an example of the type of projects we have been funding, one, for instance, was a project working with refugees. And what they did there was to test a gender transformative program to prevent intimate partner violence of an HIV among Somali refugees in Ethiopia. So testing and intervention. Another example currently being funded by us is a study trying to find out the intersection between violence against women and violence against children. So they will evaluate the extent to which participation in a multi-component, gender-informed, father-inclusive program to improve early childhood development is associated with men having more equitable attitudes towards infant care and household work, and lower rates of gender-based violence perpetrated by those men against their wives during pregnancy and in the first 2 years of postpartum. So you can see there we're looking at this intersection, violence against children, violence against women. Another grantee, for instance, in Jordan now will adapt and pilot test a group cognitive behavioral life skills intervention to prevent the occurrence of domestic violence among couples attending fertility services. And they're going to do this in preparation for a randomized control trial. We cannot fund big, RCTs, but we fund also testing. And then the key thing, I'm sure you're all looking for these key questions. What do we provide? Grants between $40,000 and $200,000 US dollars for no longer than 24 months. You can submit your proposals in English, French, or Spanish. Then also what we do is really kind of provide funding for a very limited period for a very clear measurable outcome. Your budget, we want a budget for, again, between 12 to 24 months. And in US dollars, you will find the application online too. and the budget to be a definitive line item budget for all direct costs and administrative or indirect costs, and it must exclude big capital expenditure and general operating support. So you can buy using, laptops, like small things, recorders, but not big capital. One important thing, proposals that request more than the stipulated maximum amount will be rejected at the point of receipt. So please don't submit proposals that go beyond the 200,000 because they will be really kicked out of the process straight away. How do we do our process? And what we do is we use an online portal called, that many of you might already know, is called Proposal Central online system. And we need to receive your applications by midnight South African time on the 2nd of August of this year. Only applications submitted online system before the deadline will be considered. So we don't accept any application via emails. How do we go then? You will see in our guidelines all the details on how to apply. So I really recommend to you, before you really start writing your proposal, really check the guidelines in detail. Everything is there. If you have any kind of technical issues when you're you will have to register with Proposal Central. And there are a lot of technical issues sometimes. Please do contact the colleagues at Proposal Central. We don't actually respond to technical issues, but we actually very much engage with the contents. Next slide, please. Now, how do we review? People ask a lot about how do we decide on our proposals. Every proposal is selected through a very rigorous multi-layer selection process. Once the deadline is closed, all proposals are scanned, reviewed by internal SVRI staff. Proposals that do not fulfill basic eligibility criteria will be excluded at this stage. We are talking about applications that are off topic, not research in low and middle income countries. The ones that exceed the time frames or the budget, the ones submitted late, obviously, and the ones who are not submitted online. So do not send any proposal via email. Also very important, as Heidi already mentioned to you, is very important to provide a very clear and concise abstract. Proposals with well-written abstracts are much more successful than proposals with poorly written ones. So first we do the first review. After that, the second phase comes, and in that phase, the SVRI staff and a technical team goes through a much more thorough review of the proposals, and using a set criteria that I will talk to you about just now. After that, so that second review, we arrive to a sort of short list of between 20 to 30 proposals that we find are eligible and technically solid. And those 30 or so proposals go to the review of an external expert panel. This external panel is composed of experts in the field, international experts, and they have all really, you know about them, people very well known worldwide, expertise in the field of violence against women or violence against children, and of course proposal review experience. And they all really participate on voluntary basis. They offer their time expertise to SVRI. This whole process takes around 4 to 5 months from the moment you apply to the moment you hear from us. So we know it's a long process, but we know it's very thorough, and that's important. Now we'll tell you a bit about how do we score the proposals. We have a criteria too, and again, they are in the guidelines, and I will really recommend that you take in detail. So you really, when you're drafting your proposal, you're thinking about how we're going to score them. So, key issue, overall merit. Will the project you are thinking of build evidence for violence against women and violence against children intersections, prevention and response in low and middle income countries? Will it have an impact? We will have better evidence with your proposal. The design of the methods. Is it sound, feasible and relevant, and really to the questions being asked in your research? Will the project advance basic theoretical concepts, improve or enhance policy and practice in the field of violence against women and violence against children prevention. Another key issue, when you talk about consortiums, who is going to be part of the team? Are the roles and responsibilities of all project partners clearly outlined in the proposal? We need to understand this to see really whether there is a balance of power too in the consortiums, for instance. Ethical considerations, again, Heidi really mentioned that. That's a very important thing at the SVRI. You really have to read the guidelines, all the international and ethical guidelines, and really think thoroughly. Are you going to do your research in a way that is professional, is ethical, and protecting the respondents to your research and also the research teams? We have also put in the guidelines a number of resources that you can consult for the purpose of writing the proposal. Last but not least, is your budget credible and aligned with the project methodology? So this is very much a summary of what we do in our process. Everything, as I indicated, is in the guidelines. If you go to our website and you will see everything there. There is a contact email address there. I thank you for your attention, and we look forward to receiving the proposals. I just want to mention, though, that you can send further questions to this address, but to maintain the fairness and transparency of the process, the SVRI staff cannot advise or review draft proposals. We don't engage on one-on-one discussion about the proposal because we think that is kind of really doesn't really cover the kind of the fairness of the process. So that is from me. Again, open to any questions of technical matter. And thank you so much. And now looking forward to answering any questions you have. So, are we getting questions?
Hi, Angelica. We have quite a lot of questions in the chat. I've been answering as they're coming in. And if there are any questions that I have not answered, would you mind rewriting them in the chat so I can catch them, and Angelica can now take over the answering of the questions?
Mm-hmm.
And no problem. We're really grateful for all the questions. Someone was saying they apologize for all the questions. Okay, Angelica, so we have a question from Pallavi. I wanted to know if projects related to sexual and reproductive health that include training in sexual violence, domestic violence, workplace harassment, and the legal rights related to these issues will be eligible for the grant.
Of course, if there is, I think something very important to clarify too. This is a research grant mostly. So, of course, if you're going to test an intervention, that's okay, that is possible. Focus, you have to really clearly explain the link between SRHR and violence against women. So it's possible, but again, it's about research. So there might be some part of your budget you can allocate to in the intervention itself, but really it's about research. Thanks.
I have another question from Adesola. Is it compulsory that there must be a training component of the research? I mean, they're referring to the capacity building, capacity strengthening part. What do you mean by you award grants to organizations and not to individuals? So 2 questions, capacity strengthening, individuals versus organizations.
So first of all, no, you don't need to. It's not necessary to have that. It's because many times we have in organization with the same level of capacity. So you don't need to have necessarily, if it's not needed, you don't need to have a capacity strengthening. Secondly, they do go to organizations, meaning like we don't fund, let's say, a student doing a PhD somewhere and studying kind of, even if it's a low middle income country, we don't give basically funds for research studies. It goes to an organization, established organization, not to a person.
And we don't fund independent consultants. We need an organizational platform because we believe that research done within an organization have a greater capacity to share those research findings, and also reassures us also around the sort of management of funds, etc. So Angelica, there's another message from Lucy. I'm not quite sure what the question is, but more clarification around the ethical considerations. Maybe that's something that Lucy can look at in terms of the grant guidelines. Camilla asks, how many applications do we usually receive and how many grantees do you fund?
Last year, we had a record submission, 330 applications from all over the world, and we only were able to fund 8. So the competition is tough, it's a lot. So yeah, that's the situation
Okay.
now. We don't know.
Sarah wants to know if they go beyond their character limit in the application, will their application be rejected? Yes.
Well,
I don't think you can.
Exactly.
I don't think you can go beyond the character limit. Yeah. I think the online form stops that. Okay, for you, Angelica Osman asks, what other violences against children would we consider supporting research on? I'm not sure what 6th grade violations. Maybe, Osman, you might be able to explain that a little bit more, and we'll try answer that again.
I think the key thing is to go to the guidelines where we also give a definition of what is violence against women for us, violence against children. So maybe that will be explained to you. Read the guidelines because there are key definitions in them as well.
And Genius asks, are community-based organizations eligible and do you fund new community-based organizations?
I think, again, we're talking about research. If your community-based organization is going to partner with the research institution organization to conduct research on what you are doing, that is possible. But again, this grant is for research, it's not for interventions necessarily on the ground. It's not, the budget doesn't go fully for that.
Okay. Are projects that are, this is from Dora, are projects that are related to male engagement to prevent violence against women and violence against girls, will they be funded?
Yes, we have done it in the past, so absolutely.
Devika asks about the date of the funding, the starting date. Devika, you can look at the grant guidelines and the answer will be in there. Melanie asks, can we ask for percentage salary compensations for researchers in the budget? I think also the budget's quite clear around.
It's quite clear. We don't have limits. We don't have some funds that will tell you 30% salary, 70% activities. We don't have that, but you have to justify. You have a huge, actually, salary. Basically, think of, does your budget talks to your research project? And we know research is expensive. We know it means a lot of stuff, a salary. So that's okay with us. We don't have a percentage, but the key thing is, does your budget make sense according to what you want to do?
Uruj asks, can the lead organization be a corporation partnered with NGOs? Is a corporation, Uruj, are you asking around a private sector company, I wonder? What would your answer be, do you think?
I think what we said is that funds cannot go to a private company, a private sector company, but those companies can be part of a consortium again.
Great.
Not for profit has to be the lead organization.
Juliana asks, what kind of secondary data analyses do you fund? Is data analyses from non-program data eligible? Yes.
Yes.
Lena, would you consider consortiums from various countries?
Yes, absolutely.
There's a French question. Bonjour, I'm not going to be able to research. Is it action research? Maybe we'll cut and paste that in and you can answer that in the WhatsApp. And Lena asks, is there a limited number of applications per institution?
Yes, we said that up to 2, you can submit 2. And of course, you might just get 1 funded if you get allocated a grant.
Okay, Osman's made a little bit more clarity around violence against children. We would like to research on 3 areas: rape against boys and children, corporal punishment in schools, and discrimination against disabled children. Yeah,
I think the key thing for us, remember, is it has to be a link with violence against women. That's because that's the main focus of SVRI too. So if you make the link, yes, it's possible.
But we also will be funding violence against children projects as well.
Yeah.
Experimental projects to investigate abusive behaviour and how to protect women, are they eligible? Chiaro Michal, you'd need to just describe that in more detail and what that means so we can understand that. Claire asks, is participatory action research something that could be considered, and could the grant run in multiple countries?
Yes, that's possible. And I think that reply is response to the question in French that was there too.
Okay. Ika asks, does the topic of the research mainly about violence against women and violence against children when our topic is about supporting facilities on the cases of violence against women. Ika, I think also that would require a little bit more elaboration in the proposal, but if it's research and you're trying to answer a gap in the field, then yes. Maria, could you please elaborate the importance of institutional affiliation? As we know, groups operating from hostile environments do not always have strong affiliations due to red tape, etc.
I think, again, I'm not clear about the meaning of the question, but consortiums, good experience on violence against women with programmatic and, of course, the research part, that's what is important for us. So if you can prove that, that's okay. That will be assessed by the committee.
Okay. I have a number of other questions, and I see we have a minute to go. I'm going to hand back to you, to Angelica, to close and say that we will answer the questions.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for all the questions. We don't have enough time today, but please do write to us to the email address I mentioned there. Very important, again, we cannot engage on telling you, do this, do that, do your proposal, read the guidelines, and then you can figure out, and then we can give you broad ideas, but no, we cannot really tell you, try this proposal, not that one. That's not right. But thank you so much again for your attention today. Thank you, Liz. Thanks, Enrique. Thank you, Heidi, for your time. And we look forward to receiving your proposals and really really looking forward to reading all your proposals and to engaging further if you get in the short list. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day, good morning, and thanks from the SVRI. And thanks to our colleagues from CUD and colleagues from the SVRI for the technical support. Thank you.